Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars and welcome to another PlayStation review. Today I'm taking a look at Murder on the Orient Express on the PlayStation 5. Now this game was released several months ago and it's a game I got on release, and I do believe I put up a gameplay video at the time, or a first impressions video at the time. Um, and I was hoping to get round to doing a review fairly quickly, and that wasn't the case, unfortunately. This is a game I pretty much had to put on the back burner for a few months. However, I have now played this, completed it, and I am ready to give you my thoughts and feedback on the game. So what is Murder on the Orient Express? Well, for those of you who don't know, obviously this is an Agatha Christie's original story, and it is the famed detective Hercule Poirot who stars in this detective game, and that's what we have here. It is a detective game, which is absolutely fine with me. I really enjoy detective games. There are quite a few number of detective games on the PlayStation now that feature Poirot and Sherlock Holmes, so if you are a fan of detective games, you are quite spoilt these days. So where does this one sit? Well, this is actually quite an interesting take on a detective game. It's set in like the modern times, so it's not like set in, several decades ago as you would expect it to be with like Poirot's adventures, or in the 30s, whenever they are. It's set in modern times, which is quite an interesting way to do it. And it does actually follow quite closely if you are familiar with it, the story of Murder on the Orient Express. And essentially Poirot is catching the Orient Express to get to where he needs to go, and there is a murder that takes place on the train. There are a number of suspects, and Poirot then will have to go around and interview and investigate and put the clues together and determine who is the actual criminal here, who committed the murder. But it also does a slightly different twist on it here, because it follows the story quite closely for the first few hours, and then it gets to the point where you are introduced to a new detective, and a female detective from America, who has also come aboard the train and is following a particular person. And you then get to kind of take control of this detective as well. So it flips between the two from that point onwards. You've got Poirot and this other detective. And it's quite, as I say, quite a refreshing change, if you like. I felt the whole game was quite a refreshing change, because as I said, I've played a lot of these detective games, and they can get a little bit samey, I suppose. And this takes a little bit more of a different approach to like detective games. I actually felt as though this was, I'm not saying easy is the right word, because I don't think it's easy, this game. But some detective games, you've really got to kind of, have your grey cells, working in order for them to really get the best out of the games. And this one actually does a pretty decent job of helping you make the decisions without making the decisions for you. For example, when Poirot meets a new character, he will sometimes listen into conversations, and he'll pick up little snippets like, where they're from, how old they are, and what they do for a living. And then you've got to kind of piece that together. It'll give you the option at some point in a discussion with them to determine and tell and say, where they're from, what age they are, and what they do for a living. And all of this kind of goes towards his files in his own head, sort of thing. I'm not. I was tempted to say Mind Palace then, but that's more of a Sherlock Holmes thing than Poirot thing. But that's essentially what it does. You know what I mean? And there are quite a few puzzles as well to be had here in the game. For example, an early puzzle in the game is there's two chefs arguing outside the Orient Express. Both of them are chefs on the train. One of them is a pastry chef, one of them's a sous chef, and they're both arguing because there's not enough room to store all the ingredients in the freezer on the train. So as Poirot, you've got to figure out, by putting this puzzle together, how you're going to fit the ingredients in the freezer in all the right orders. And there's other things like putting pictures together, that have been ripped up to put them in the right order. You've got to kind of figure out how to open safes here and there. There are clues as to what you should be doing to find the right combination. And when you've found enough clues, when you go into like a crime scene investigation, you've got to find all the clues. And then once you've found enough clues, it kind of puts the scene up. You kind of press triangle and you'll kind of piece the scene together. And then once you've done that, it'll kind of determine what the outcome must have been, sort of thing. And then occasionally it'll give you the option to determine whether a certain character is a suspect or not, and you could choose yes or no, determining with the evidence that you've already got in front of you, sort of thing. So as a detective game, it's actually quite complex in a lot of ways, but it's also quite simple to play and follow. I actually found this quite a pleasure to play, and sometimes these detective games, you kind of like, you think, there's no way I would ever solve that puzzle without help. And even though there is a hint system here on the game, where it will kind of give you 3 different hints to get yourself through a certain part of the crime scene investigation or puzzle or whatever. I think I only had to use it twice in the whole game, and the game itself, you could probably get it finished about between 13, 14 hours, something like that. I think, I'm not actually 100% sure how long it took me, but I think it was around 13 hours. So it's a decent sized little game, this, and it takes some interesting turns in the story. And I actually also think the game looks quite impressive. Now, there are some clunky moments here and there in regards to graphical stuff going on. But overall, I really do like the aesthetic here. It's almost like a cel-shaded, like cartoony aesthetic going on. And the voice acting, I think, is really excellent too. Everybody's got distinct voices. All the characters kind of are actually quite memorable as well. Sometimes I'll play a lot of these detective games and you're looking at a suspect list and you're thinking, I don't even remember talking to that person. And that's not the case here. Everybody kind of stands out, and everybody is reasonably memorable. And it's quite a joy to interview some of the suspects, really, because it doesn't feel too arduous a task to actually interview them, sort of thing. 'Cause it doesn't make it too complex when you're doing that process, when you're interviewing them. So sometimes that process can be quite dull, and it doesn't feel like that here. The sentences don't go on for ages and ages and ages. It feels quite snappy, the dialogue. They get through it reasonably quickly. And it takes itself in some interesting directions as well in regards to the story. So for me, I really actually quite enjoyed this. I'm actually tempted to say this is one of my favourite, certainly Poirot games, and it's probably up there with my favourite detective games overall. I think sometimes these detective games that you play, whether it be Poirot or Sherlock Holmes ones or whatever, sometimes I think they'll add too much and they forget what we play these games for, and that's to be a detective. For example, with the Sherlock Holmes one, when they turned it into like an open world, and you're just like, you don't need an open world. They can be quite linear, these games. I don't play these type of games to kind of wander aimlessly around an open world searching for clues, or just wandering aimlessly down pointless avenues. I like sometimes a nice curated story when it's a detective game, and I like sometimes for me to kind of feel like I'm a detective, and not kind of piecing pointless clues together. And this is pretty good at that. I mean, I have to say I was suitably impressed with this one. As I say, there are some clunky moments here and there. There's some questionable bits in the game. I think when it does shift to this detective in America, there are times when you wish it stayed on Poirot, but it's not too arduous a task. And from my perspective, I had a good time with this one, guys. So I do recommend checking out Murder on the Orient Express. You're probably going to start be able to pick this up in a sale pretty anytime soon now. So if you're a fan of these type of games, I think this is probably an essential pickup, guys. And in a sale, for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. So I hope you enjoyed this review. Thank you very much for joining me. I will, of course, be back with plenty more reviews on the channel very, very soon.